Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first of many fireside chats with Coach Cam. You'll hear us call this series of events Friday Night Lights, as this is your time to kick back and enjoy an intimate Friday night chat with your candidate for State Representative District 12 and my friend, Coach Cam.
I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a Christian, I'm a servant.
Cameron Campbell, affectionately known as Coach Cam for his work with the Houston Texans, USA Football, and KIPP Houston High School, is a leader, public speaker, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and author, and he's running for state representative of District 132.
It's time now to introduce the man of the hour, your representative, my friend, coach, philanthropist, athlete, and more, Coach Cam. How you doing, Coach?
I'm also a Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye cover singer.
I saw that. I was trying to find a way to get your mic on so we could actually hear if you got the chops. I saw you had the words down.
Songs in the Key of Life is one of the most important albums like in the history of music. Not just R&B, not just like music. That album is phenomenal.
Do you have anything to say before we jump in? I got some questions for you, obviously, before we open it up to everybody else who's going to be in the chat and asking you some questions. We'll do that a little bit later, but do you have a few words you want to kick off with before I start grilling you?
The first thing I'll say is it's winter now, obviously. I enjoy the heck out of football. So anytime that we get to play some band, I heard the live band intro, I'm fired up. So I'm excited to get a chance to, we're going to talk about a ton of things. I'm sure you're going to find a way to sneak some football in there knowing you. And so let's get right into it.
I want to kick off if you could tell us a little bit about your why. I always ask, on my shows, it's one of the first questions I ask everybody because I think that why drives every decision you make, drives the way you live your life. It's really important. Can you tell us your why?
Yes, I guess the best way to answer that is, my personal why is giving and serving. I grew up in the church, been a member of the Church Without Walls for, I guess, 24, 25 years. I joined my sophomore year in high school. I had to go back and do the math. But, growing up in church, one of the advantages is you get to really understand what your spiritual gifts are. And so from a pretty young age, I knew that giving and serving was just one of my natural gifts. And so I'd say, as a human, as a contributor to our community, giving is my natural why. Now, as far as running, I have to point back to the insurrection. So January 6th of 2021, that was the why for me. That's what started me along this path. I've done a lot in the community. I can check off my contribution to community work. I can check off my contribution to education, to, again, sports. But, the insurrection for me left me baffled. It left me frustrated. And more importantly, it left me, questioning the people that were in positions of leadership. Not only could they potentially have something to do with it, but how could they stand by and watch? And so, that took me along an entire year's journey. And so, I spent the majority of last year preparing myself, preparing my ethos, my learning values, and really just doing a big deep dive in history just to understand the things that were important to me and to recalibrate the things that this country is about, this state's about, and my home is about.
I want to go back a bit because now, like, the why, that's a powerful why, right? There's sometimes there's moments in our life, sometimes it's a gradual, but when you can pinpoint an actual moment, I think that's really important. But to the type of person, the type of man, the type of father that you are, I want to go back. I know that in speaking with you before, you talk about your dad and how watching him work really inspired you. Can you kind of elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, so if we're going to go back, I guess we got to go all the way back, right? So I grew up in Houston, very young, on the south side of town in South Park. And I think like most Houstonians, and certainly most people on the west side of town, it truly is a place for opportunity. And so my parents hopped me out of school to school to school in HISD, and I call it like the Fresh Prince effect, right? So you remember the mid '90s, the whole Fresh Prince story, moving from Philadelphia to LA or to the West Side for opportunity. And so we ended up in the Cypress area And it was an adjustment, less about an adjustment from an academic or a rigor standpoint. But if for those who are familiar with the Acadian Cyprus area, the 90s in Cyprus was was a challenge, right? So I remember very early moving in, and I was always a big kid. I moved into the third grade, and fourth or fifth graders, on the bus in the community, antagonizing and picking fights, and they used to have this chant. They used to say, "Fight, fight, black against white. If white don't win, we all jump in." And so, just being the only black kid on the bus, one of the only few black kids in the school, that was a challenge for me. But I say that to say, it was those formative years, and it was, number one, my father's hard work. My father is the hardest working man that I've ever come across. I definitely credit him for my work ethic. But the second man in my life was my grandfather, my papa. So I was very blessed that he, lived in the house with us as a kid. And, to me, I say he was the richest man I've ever known. And so while maybe not by traditional terms of wealth, he could read the old King James Bible, which I still have a hard time reading, right? So he could read the old King James Bible. He could read the newspaper, but that was about it. But he just walked around quoting scriptures, just the old time saint, walked around quoting scriptures, teaching me life. He taught me how to love without ever using that word. And so, those two men in my life were deeply impactful.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get into actually that your faith and the climate growing up in Cyprus, but I think you did it. I think you talked about it a little bit there. So I want to go a little bit further back. So now seeing your dad and his work ethic, tell me about your first job.
My first job.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you didn't think. Well, I know your dad works, but I need to know about you.
Okay, so my first legal job was at the Jack in the Box on Highway 6 in Clay when I turned 16. I worked there for 3 days, and then they opened the Kroger off of Barker Cypress and 529, and I quit and went to Kroger. My first job, I was 9 years old, and this is probably, I don't think so. I don't, the term I'd use is like working class poor, right? So my parents lived way outside of their means for me to have that opportunity for education. And so I'd say they were working class poor. So definitely, hard workers, but had to scrap. And sometimes there was, more month than money at the end of the month, or more bills than money. And so, at 9 years old, I remember asking my dad to buy me a basketball goal from Academy. And, he said he didn't have the money. And so I tied the lawnmower to the back of my bicycle, and I went around cutting grass. And so, that was my first job, and I learned 2 things in that job really quick. The first one was I learned how to have adult interaction as a kid. So if you could imagine, some people fret cold calling. I was cold knocking, 1. But then 2, I learned a hack. If you actually cut the people's grass first and then tell them that they can pay you whatever they want, that was a very effective way to get the job done.
See, that's pretty clever. I was delivering papers for my brother for free. So I think you were smarter than me back then, because you had a plan in place. I'm thinking back to you just mowing lawns first and then saying, what do I deserve? I think that's actually pretty brilliant. I might actually take that down for me moving forward.
So I took that from that to washing cars. So then I ended up with a bucket on the top side of my bike. And so I had soap, a little soap tied to it. And yeah, I think that for me, just as just seeing the guilt or the feeling of, not being comfortable asking, and not only necessarily not wanting to hear no, nobody wants to hear no, but just knowing, my dad, was gone by the time I woke up to work, and by the time I got home, he was still at work. And so, like, yeah, anything I could do to contribute was just kind of the disposition I had.
So going through that town, like you talked to us about being kind of the only black kid there, what other, and obviously the fights, I don't want to dive into that. What other things did you see? What other types of adversity? Because, I don't know, for those that don't know, going from, an athlete to a coach to an athletic director to all these things that you've done in your life. But what I see is someone who had to have faced adversity as growing up, because that does make you stronger. That makes you want to give back. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Now on the fight, so luckily I didn't actually have to fight. Once you stand.
Oh,
So
well, that's
first
good.
off, I was the biggest kid in school. So once he caught one of those kids 1-on-1, it's like, what were you saying? And then that went away. But adversity, man. So when I was in the sixth grade, uh, my mom was partially paralyzed, and she had, I don't know the technical term, but she had limited, I say like limited motion. So, from middle school, fifth or sixth grade, I was washing, folding, ironing, in addition to, so all the things, all the housekeeping things that she would do, in addition to my dad working a ton. But if you think about it, that was one less salary, and so there were times when we had to lean on additional support to make it work. And you know, I think those days, and my parents, we had these conversations all the time, and I think that there's a natural guilt from a parent's disposition, but those days made me. And so there were times when we literally had the food card, and we'd have $27.36. And again, this is before cell phones. This is, I didn't walk into the grocery store with a calculator, but I used to go to the HEB on Highway 6 and Karen Way and ride my bike, and I would spend, a penny less than $27.36. I learned how to do quick math very quickly in my head. But, it was those types of, I'd say character building moments, right? That's where you earn grit, and you don't know any different because you're in that season, you're in that moment. And so, having to step in and relieve duties, right? Because again, going back, the last thing you ask your father to do is, for a summer vacation or home for summer break, and you're sitting around playing. I guess that was Super Nintendo then. It wasn't PlayStation yet, so it was Super Nintendo. Yeah, it's just stepping in and providing relief how and where you can to the best of your ability.
One of the core values in your campaign, it's all about access. Can you tell me a little bit more? Why is that so important to you? I think I know the answer for what you just said, but I'd like to hear you a little bit more in depth.
Being an advocate for access for me, it hits home. I think of all of the priorities, and just I essentially took the things that I value as a person and kind of shaped that into where I think we need to go as a district. But being an advocate for access is so important. After the turkey drive, so we had a little bit of momentum. We understood how to do community programming, and just how to get into schools and how to serve families where where the help is needed the most. And for years, it's gone off without a hitch. The first one was the first one, but this year we faced a challenge that I've never faced before. And I tell this story. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I think just in the space of authenticity. So this year's recipient was a young kid named Jorge, full of, when I say energy, I mean like energy battery kid with you remember the pink bunny
The
rabbit,
bunny that keeps
kind of
going.
drumming. That's Jorge. That is Jorge. So we get to their house, and we're setting up the Christmas presents, just staging everything, and it's just so much energy. And so the way the program works essentially is we contact the school, and we kind of get the kids' Christmas list, a wish list, and most things you get most times are essentials, right? So undergarments and sweaters and jackets and beanies, just needs. But we always try to check a kid's wants. It's Christmas time, and so Jorge asked for three things. He asked for Legos, he asked for sports balls, and he asked for puzzles. And so we're in Academy, getting all the balls. We're at Target, getting all the Legos and stuff. And I get to puzzles, and in his kind of profile, it says that that Jorge has a mental disability, and it doesn't say anything more than that. I don't know anything about his modifications or any of his situation. So I'm walking up and down the puzzle aisle, and I'm like, well, okay, so Jorge's 5. I know that he has a mental disability. Do I get a puzzle for a 5-year-old? Do I get a puzzle for a 3-year-old? He could be a savant. Do I get a puzzle for a 90? I don't know what to get. I don't know what to get. And so, I'm not proud of it. I ended up just getting another pack of Legos because I did not know how to
Right.
handle that
Right.
situation. And when you think about it, I'm going to build a relationship with Jorge. We're going to spend time together, just moving forward, right? But it's Jorge's aunts and it's the uncles and it's the cousins, the ones that he sees a couple of times a year, and there are those authentic relationships. It's unfair to me as a giver. It's disproportionately unfair to Jorge that in this climate in 2022, it's such an easy fix. And so if you match whatever disability or a special need that Jorge has, and it's code L8, just the same way that you have a Monopoly, box, suggested for kids 10 years old,
Right.
choking hazard, just to have a label to say that, for kids with mental disabilities, this game is compatible with this, this need. And so, when I say being an advocate for access, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I think that there are so many people in our community who need advocacy and who need representation.
It's so, yes, it's so important because I just, as you were saying it, I could think, well, I wouldn't know. How would anyone know what to do? And you don't. I could see why you wouldn't want to get like a 3-year-old puzzle, because like you said, what if that's not the issue? He's really good. He could do 9, 10, 11-year-old puzzles. Well, I was going to think of that's poorly. And then if you get it too hard, again. So that's actually a great point that you bring up. I want to actually talk about your small business ownership and a couple of things you're doing in terms of how you're dealing with COVID. But before we get to that, because I did kind of touch on the fact that you were an athlete, you were a coach, you were an athletic director. Can you maybe summarize a little bit for me? Like, how do you go from like the biggest kid in school? Obviously, that's probably why you became into athletics, and then into that kind of athletic director and those other roles. Because then I do want to talk about kind of the small business and because you're doing something special with your salary. So I do want to get to that, but I want to hear the path. How do you get there?
So I was blessed. I had amazing coaches through my entire, I don't know if I call it a career, but entire time playing. And so, went to Truett and Watkins Middle School, went to Langham. They built South Springs, so I got zoned to South Springs. I actually played for the first Black head coach inside Fair ISD, Coach Blackshear. And so, from the staff that he put together was just so exceptional. My position coach, Coach Fitzhenry, is the head coach and athletic director now at CE King. He's having a ton of success. So, when it comes to coaching development, I got more than I deserved. And when I got to the University of Houston, my position coach, his name is Clancy Barone. I think he was actually the first person to introduce me to philosophy and stoicism. But he would say that he was 51% teacher, 49% coach. And he actually went off to coach in the NFL. He won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos with that Peyton Manning team a couple of years ago. And so, for me, it was Coach Blackshear, it was Coach Barone, but then, my mentor coach was Coach Ray Seals, the retired head coach from HISD Madison. He was the first person to ever give me a shot. And so it was my first coaching experience was the Houston Texans youth camp. And he pulled me aside. We're out by the bubble, and we had this really impromptu interview. And so he said, now how much football do you know? At this time, I'm 21 years old or something, 21, 22.
So you said everything. Because at 21, we
No.
say, I know everything about football. That's what I would have done. I would have been wrong. But that's what I would have said. So I know everything.
Well,
You're probably a little more humble than I am.
I said, I know as much as a 22-year-old, right? Like,
yeah.
I know a lot to be 22. Yeah. And so he said, well, how much do you know about working with kids? And I said, oh, Coach, I know a lot about that. And he said, well, which one is important? Now, this is, you remember those college career courses you take, like how to interview and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm saying to myself, okay, this is the trick question in the interview. And so, I said, Coach, I don't know what the right answer is, but, we asked which one is more important. Which one is more important, football or knowing how to connect with kids? And I said, Coach, I don't know what the right answer is, but, I think it's working with kids. And he said, that's exactly right. I can teach you, all the football you need to know. Working with kids is special. And so, from that, I just, again, kind of going back to, understanding my spiritual gifts, I just knew that I had an obligation to spend, what I call my 20s doing God's work. And that's coaching, working in nonprofit. I work for the Positive Coaching Alliance, a nonprofit based out of Stanford. And really just introducing character education and social and emotional intelligence to athletes, to coaches, to parents, and really just, how to develop a holistic and well-rounded athletic program.
And then how does that, obviously it makes sense to me, but how does that then roll into your small business? And what were some of the difficulties, the hardships that you faced as a small business? And kind of part B, because we've all had to face this over the last couple of years, how did COVID kind of affect that and make you realize the importance of small businesses?
Well, that's a doozy.
Yeah,
Well, let me tell you something. If Oprah or Dan Rather is looking for a replacement, you are on their heels. You're throwing zingers out tonight.
I've been watching Diane Sawyer getting ready for this. So,
so to close the book on coaching, when I took the head coaching job at KIPP Houston High School, we had 16 kids on their roster, on the football roster on day one. And so, we grew that program from 16 kids to 23 to 39 to 53 kids. And, I take very little credit for it. It was two things. The first thing was we introduced the off-season program to those kids and we got them, gaining weight. But the second thing is, I think this ties into small business. We taught those kids, one thing that we'd say every off-season is, we love failure, we hate quitting. And so we taught those kids how to fail. If you think about an off-season program, if you put together, a really concise 8-week, strength-based program, and you've got kids who are in the weight room and they never fail at a rep, they never, they make all their lifts, that means they're not trying hard enough.
Right.
And so a part of that culture for us was, we had to create a space where kids enjoyed failure and we celebrated kids failing. And so, for me, it's, I think that paradigm moves directly to small business for me. And so, being a person of color, being, just starting business, again, having an entrepreneurial bone, going back to my time, as a 9-year-old, cutting grass, I just had that itch. I knew I wanted to solve problems. I knew I wanted to try to figure out how to solve problems. And so, having access to capital and, traditional institutional lending resources just wasn't on the table for me. So, when I started in business, it was just literally, it was bootstrap before I knew the term bootstrap and just trying to figure things out. So I started training kids, in the summer and after school, and I quickly moved that into an after school program. And so I would vend with local ISDs and schools and government agencies to provide after school programming. And the very first program I started was a program called Challenger. And it was a marriage of character education curriculum and a sports curriculum taught together. And so more than just rolling a ball out and watching the kids play, it was teaching them life skills through the game of sports.
I love it. I read this and I had to read it again. And I think it took me about 3 or 4 reads before I really understood what I was reading. So you'll understand once I ask you this question. So can you talk about how you plan to donate your salary?
That wasn't a typo.
I like I said, for me, me, so so how I am. And I went, I think something's wrong here, but no, I double checked that. That's so I got to know why, how, why. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I consider myself a social entrepreneur, and you asked about COVID a moment ago. My business was on the ropes for a few moments during COVID, and I applied for PPP loans, and I applied 7 times and got denied 7 times. And so, I understand the jadedness of small business owners, especially again Black and brown small business owners, who we know research tells us that they typically receive disproportionately lesser when it comes to government programs or government opportunities. So the idea of BIG, or Go Big, Business Innovation Grants, is providing small grants. The idea is not to subsidize a business, but to drive a business forward. I was having a conversation with a local business owner. It's a donut shop that I frequent probably more than I should. But I asked him, I said, look, if you were to receive additional funding and the only stipulation would be that you had to innovate within your business, what would you do? And how much would it cost? And he said, I know that right now we're making delicious donuts, but we're using the cheapest possible products that are out there. There are, you know, key ingredients that that go into our donuts that we could use, we could stand to improve, or even just to be able to test out, the solvency, right? Because again, I could try a key ingredient that may not work, it may change the outcome of the donut. But the idea of business innovation grants is, if we could provide some resources for that small business, for that donut shop, and then allow them to make a change to gluten-free or sugar-free or something that's just a little more healthy, that's real-time innovation. And so again, as a social entrepreneur, the same way that I started our first and family scholarships, or our turkey drive, or anything else, the idea is, we're going to figure out how to get the capital and the major dollars in, but let's start by just providing relief and support for people who need it. And so, to that point, again, just saying true to a theme of the conversation, I just understand one of my gifts is giving. And so, yeah, I'm pledging, my entire salary as a state representative to fund business innovation grants for our local small businesses, with the intent of it being something to move the needle 1 inch. And we think about just how industrious House District 132 is and the small businesses around. If everybody moves that needle 1 inch, that moves us all yards ahead.
You had me at donut, but anyone that knows me knows he had me at donut. But I do want to ask a little bit more about that, just because you use like an ingredient, but could it be an innovation in terms of the way they market, the way they deliver? Like, could it be anything that kind of enhances that business or innovates that business? I like the idea of better ingredients. Don't get me wrong. But
right.
I'm just curious, as a marketer, like, would that be another way of doing it as well? Because I know we've talked to a lot of small businesses who have really struggled over the last 2 years, and just even that little bit, right, could help, could go a long way.
That's right. So you think about like a bookkeeper or a CPA, right? So if you could just imagine the reams and reams of paper that they probably, again, go through just out of standard SOPs, right? So when a client comes in, we print this document out, and again, the idea is not to place a Band-Aid, but it's a Wayne. Now you're Canadian, so you should get this, right? But it's a Wayne Gretzky thing. It's not skating to where the puck is; it's skating to where the puck's going to be. And so, just being able to provide, resources for a paper-heavy organization to be able to go paperless. I mean, that itself is innovation. And so again, it's not, spaceships going up and EV car. I mean, all that stuff's cool. I'm here for all of those things. But when we talk to small business owners and patrons in our community, I mean, that stuff's a mile away. It's all about, what's happening in my life on a day in and day out basis. And I think that if we can provide resources to move all of us forward, I think that's where we want to be.
You call him your pawpaw. Mine is called a papu. And my papu always said the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So it's those small bites, right? So with that, I am segueing into some questions. So for anyone that's listening, who's here, who has some questions for Coach Cam, now's your time to put them in. I have the first one, and it is about your pawpaw. So I haven't heard that term before. I do like it though. So Coach Cam, what would you have to do in Austin to make your pawpaw proud?
Wow. Yeah, that's a tough one for me. He passed away in 2002, and I think I was just able to start talking about him, maybe a couple of years ago. My papa was a simple man. He did not know what the word meant, but he was a horticulturalist. So he used to like make these deviants of bell peppers and banana peppers and green tomatoes. He fried green tomatoes, and I'm sharing that to say I think that the tinkering and the curiosity and the willing to try different things is maybe something I picked up from him. But if I were to try to figure out going into it how to make him proud, it would be to think about everybody when I make every decision. And that's not just voter rights. That's not just women's rights, the obvious things that are broken in Texas right now, but it's considering everybody. My papa grew up a sharecropper. I mean, believe it or not, in our generation, my grandfather was a sharecropper. And so, just the idea of, for those who aren't familiar with what sharecropping is to short another stick. It's this far away from slavery. And so, you collaborate or partner with the landowner. They'd say, okay, in order to feed you, to get you clothes, your stay here, your room and board, you cost me $100 a day. And then you pick cotton, or you pick whatever, whatever it is for the day, and you come back and they weigh it and say, okay, you earned $87 a day, so you're $13 in the hole today. So I think it's that type of intent to understand that there are not just systems to hold people back in our culture. I think we all know that, but it's treating everybody with dignity and with respect, and with the same thing that you would expect them to treat you with. My papa taught me the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Nassim Taleb talks about the silver rule, and that's don't do to others what you don't want done to you.
See, I'm going to get to the next question. It's just you're hitting out. We talked about football, and you said, I'd try to get football into the conversation, and instead you got my true passion, which is food. But then you went and talked about something real, which I think is important, because treating everybody the same, like at the end of the day, that's really the message, right? Is if we all treated each other the same, a lot of these things that hold us back probably wouldn't be as big. So the next question, what coaching aspects, go back to your coaching, what coaching aspects are you looking to bring to politics? And it better not be like the beep test or the bit, like any of that suicides, none of those running things. Don't you dare mandate any of that.
There are a couple of politicians who need some gasser, because them jokers are out of breath. I'll tell you that right now. But I think when it comes to to coaching, I think my background in coaching that I think carries over directly is ultimately, a coach is, going back to Coach Perone, a coach is an educator and a leader and a teacher. And I think that the first thing is, politics needs to become just a tad bit less sexy, right? This should not be a job that you're looking forward to going to take advantage of people. It's a job about service. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, I think that it's very important that our leadership comes back to their district, comes back to their constituents, and they teach and they let them know what's going on. And so obviously, I'm sure there's a ton of information that probably has to be secured, but this is why we voted for this, and this is what it means to you. This is why this is happening. And just, keeping a channel of communication. One thing that I do have to give the Positive Coaching Alliance a ton of credit for, and again, that experiencing that as I began to start my coaching career definitely shaped me. But one thing that they teach is, you have your coaches meeting at the beginning of the season, and you check in with your players and you check in with your parents. The idea is not to go to Austin and disappear and stick your head in the dirt and don't come back. But the idea is to come back and lead and serve. And so I think that, creating a pathway, a healthy pathway for constituents to be able to connect with their leadership and also be held accountable. You guys remember, I know you remember this, Tony, the Super Bowl where the Seahawks lost. They were on like the 2-yard line. Marshawn Lynch was at his absolute best. And you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That same year I was coaching, we played Kincaid, and we were down going into the half, and we just needed a pick-me-up, just something to kind of get us into the, into the locker room, to try to give us a chance to regalvanize and get ourselves back together. I called a ridiculous play as throwing a slant on the 2-yard line. And I remember that feeling. And the feeling was all of the energy left our sideline. And from that point, again, just speaking in clarity, we knew that we were going to lose from that moment. So I've made the right call. I've made the wrong call, but it's having the courage to stand up in front of your team and say, hey, I made the wrong call.
Yeah.
I had a chance to get us into the end zone, and I made the wrong call.
No,
it's not over. This is what we're going to do to move forward, but I have to own that. And I think that leadership that can hold themselves accountable is how you gain trust from your constituents and your neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being so open, so candid, so transparent. I want to remind everyone who is listening, who sees this later on, you're going to see, if you follow Vote Coach Cam on Facebook, here's some of the things you're going to get to see. There's going to be links to these things. So volunteer sign up, obviously very important for what we're doing here. Follow up all the social media tags, how you can learn more about Coach Cam and what he's going to bring to the table. upcoming happenings. So like Friday Night Lights and other things like this. How to become a contributor. So there's going to be a link for the Act Blue link. And then spread the word. Of course, encourage everyone to join in the conversation, join in on these calls, join in on Friday Night Lights. And until next time that we see you, Coach Cam, man, I really appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your time, Tony. I appreciate it.